So the best way I can phrase this is Georgia had a pretty big weekend. I think that kind of encapsulates the entirety of our focus for this show. May get into something that Kerryon Johnson, former Auburn running back, current NFL running back, had to say over the weekend. But Georgia had a pretty big weekend. Now, I want to start and like when you're on a Word document, and you hit enter and then tab and create that little you create the bullet points.
Yeah.
We're going to start hitting those there. I want to start by talking about Georgia in a local sense. Because South Georgia has become a recruiting hotbed, and obviously that's going to filter up to the next level. And we saw a bunch of guys get opportunities to head to the NFL, whether that was being drafted or signing undrafted free agent deals, which we saw a multitude of over the weekend, which Saturday basically becomes got to be one of the busiest days for people who cover the draft and cover NFL teams, because you have the draft, and then you have Saturday, which is the final rounds of the NFL draft. And then immediately following that last pick, all of the players who didn't get drafted, who are eligible, that are signing deals with your team. So it's just a hugely busy time in the NFL. And so we saw just a rush of signings on Saturday and Sunday, including a bunch of local guys. So I want to talk about a bunch of these folks. But first of all, I think it's funny, PJ, because you are getting old.
Sure.
Because I feel confident in saying that you did a game day from a game for all of these players.
That's a very good point.
At some point in high school, you were at a game for one of these players broadcasting prior to it.
That's a very good point. Very good possibility.
Not a possibility. Reality.
Honestly, looking forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah. So all of these guys, I know you have done games for. We'll start with Calvin Turner, former New Hampstead superstar.
Well, there's the first one. That's it. Already crossed off the list.
Yes.
Yep. You're right.
Okay. Yep. So we'll continue that. Did PJ do a game day from one of their games? Yep. Calvin Turner played his football at New Hampstead, then went to Jacksonville. They shut down the football program at Jacksonville, so he took his talents out to Hawaii, which, I mean, trading up.
Not a bad choice by any means.
Trading up, went out, balled out in Hawaii. He has signed, he was an undrafted free agent. He's accepted workouts with the Ravens and the 49ers, which you need a replacement for Debo.
True.
Calvin Turner would be a pretty good place to just try it out.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be fun. And then Ravens are the Ravens, one of the best, I don't want to say programs, one of the best franchises in football is the best way to put that.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, though, about Debo. And honestly, if you just want to have some fun, want to watch some good football, like, seriously, go watch some Calvin Turner highlights from Hawaii from like the past year or two, especially last year. Like you said, a little bit of everything. I mean, some punt returns, some kick returns, the wide, obviously receiving, some rushing touchdowns. I mean, he did it all for them. It was amazing.
And then going a little bit up the road, this might be the first one where maybe this was a little too far out of your range. I don't know, but still a 912 guy. Long County's Tariq Carpenter,
right,
saw himself get drafted in the 6th round by the Green Bay Packers out of Georgia Tech. He was the lone Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket to see his name called, but joining former Long County teammate Jamin Davis, who was a first-round pick by the Washington Commanders last year. So from that team, from that Long County team, 2 NFL players now. I mean, that's something. This, to me, a really cool story, and one that has now circumnavigated the United States. Demetrius Robertson.
True. Yeah.
Savannah Christian superstar, goes out, plays his freshman year at Cal, was, I believe, freshman All-American at Cal, transfers back to the University of Georgia, plays on a bunch of really good teams for Georgia, and then this past year transfers to Auburn. So we've gone from Savannah, right, all the way to California, back to Athens, to Alabama. Auburn's in Alabama, for those of you folks who are freaking out right now. Auburn's in Alabama.
Oh, wait a minute.
So, so from Athens to Alabama, and then from Alabama, He has now signed an undrafted free agent deal with the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh my!
So I mean, to complete this, he's got to play a few years with the Seahawks and then play for one of the New York teams or Buffalo.
True.
Right?
Maybe. Yeah, I was going to say maybe venture up there, closer to Canada.
But such a
Buffalo.
cool story for
crazy.
like a amazing person.
Yeah.
And someone who is kind of becoming like what the story of you didn't used to hear of journeyman college football players.
True.
Just because of the way the rules worked.
Mm-hmm.
But Demetrius Robertson, absolutely a journeyman college football player, and now getting his chance joining another former South Georgia guy. And I should say former. He's always going to be a South Georgia guy. But joining another South Georgia guy, DJ Dallas.
Yeah.
Up in Seattle. So a couple of 912 guys if you're looking for some local interest up in Seattle. Moving on, we're actually going to talk to this guy tomorrow at 2:00. Former Groves High School standout Shabari Davis. No, you don't want his games.
Right, yeah.
He had an interesting story as well. Born in Garden City, played in Garden City Stadium for Groves, and then his first community college, can you guess the name of it?
Off the top of my head, no.
Garden City. Garden City.
I probably
I tried to tee it up for you. Garden City Community College. Then from there, he went to Southeast Missouri State. He has signed an undrafted free agent deal with, I guess, the team closest to home, Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right. Yeah.
And so he'll be down there working as a defensive back with them. Got that camp invite. Another guy I know we have done games for in the past, Kevin Harris, Bradwell Institute standout.
Yeah.
Signed with South Carolina out of high school. Led the SEC in rushing his junior year. He was selected in the 6th round by Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots.
How about that? At least now listen, if you want to go somewhere to really be able to show your talents and they're going to put you in the right spot and use you in the right areas, that's the New England Patriots for sure. So really looking forward to his shot there. But I'm glad also that they kind of run a multi-back system. And Kevin Harris, now his body could take
Kevin Harris and Damian Harris. So the law firm of Harris and Harris.
Yeah, for sure. Kevin Harris's body could take it for sure. I mean, big, bulky tank of a running
built
back.
like a refrigerator.
Yeah, it's a monster.
Yeah.
Then again, I am happy he's not going to have to carry 30 plus times every weekend now. You know what I mean? Because you look back at the Bradwell times, they were running him quite a bit. Even in South Carolina, he was the workhorse. So I can't wait to see his opportunity. But hopefully he can get some big runs and instead of have those 25 carry days, more like 12 to 15.
Oh, Mike Bobo ran the
down a little
hell out of Kevin Harris. Congratulations to him being selected by the New England Patriots. Also, Myjai Sanders, former Camden County standout, went up to Cincinnati. I remember Ben and BJ went down and covered his signing, and that was kind of the beginning of Cincinnati starting to build that foundation of where they are now as probably the premier G5, soon to be Big 12 member school. And so Myjai heads up to Cincinnati, becomes a terror off the edge. He was selected in the 3rd round by the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah. So going to go out there and try to become another Chandler Jones for the Cardinals out there. And I think he might be the guy to do it. A guy with very local ties. He actually committed to his college out of this studio. Quandre Mosley, former Glenn Academy standout, went the JUCO route and then came here and did his commitment live on the air, where he signed with Kentucky. Played at Kentucky, had a pick 6, a bunch of turnovers up there for the Wildcats. He has signed an undrafted free agent deal with the Dallas Cowboys. So congratulations to Quandre there. He's going to be playing corner in the NFL.
Want to hear a fun fact about Quandre Mosley?
Hit me.
Beat me in pickup basketball one
I
night.
would imagine he probably beat the hell out of you in pickup basketball.
It did not go well for our team, but it was obviously a great time to have him there, and a great person, good guy to hang around, and obviously wish him best of luck. But the premier athlete, without a doubt, and I know firsthand.
But yeah, you were number 2 there, though.
Of course,
on the court that day. Okay,
I mean, any gym I walk into, I'm easily number 2.
Yeah. Finally, after a
definitely not the other, definitely not one.
Finally, wrapping up the guys from the 912 who are now headed to the NFL. Zacoby Mclean from Valdosta, part of a bunch of really good Valdosta football teams. Why are you giggling?
I'm just still laughing at the joke.
Because you literally just called yourself poop at basketball?
Well, yeah.
You said no matter what, you walked in there, you're number 2?
Self-burn.
Yeah, that's
Those
fair.
are rare.
I appreciate it.
No, I mean, that's the thing. But I know for a fact I'm number 2. I'm definitely not number 1, though. So, even if I'm worse than number 2, I'm at least.
Who does number 2 work for?
There's so many different jokes you can go for there. No, but McLean, you were.
Yeah, Zacoby McLean out of Valdosta was a safety for Auburn, signs an undrafted free agent deal with the Baltimore Ravens. For all the college football fans out there who's like, why do I know that name? Well, he's played for Auburn for the past 4 years. But also, think back 2019 Iron Bowl.
There you go.
Ball goes off of the back of Najee Harris's helmet, and a defensive back picks it off and takes it 100 yards for the upset over Alabama in the Iron Bowl there. That was the Kobe Mclean.
That'd be him.
Out of Valdosta, now headed up to Baltimore to play for the Ravens. So that's just a quick recap of where the local guys ended up in the NFL. That being said, again, the theme of the show, Georgia had a big weekend.
Yep.
I think it is safe to say now, after this draft, that the state of Georgia is the premier high school football state in the country. Over Texas, over Florida, over California. And I know there are going to be people listening and people reacting online saying, bro, Friday Night Lights, Texas, like it's Texas or it's California. Look at all the Heisman Trophy winners. Look at the quarterbacks that have come out of there. I just want to present a few facts to you. This one I tweeted out a little bit earlier just to try to gauge your reaction, but I believe this to be the case. This past weekend, Texas led in number of players drafted. They had 32 players drafted in the 22 NFL draft, right? Georgia was second with 30. Here's where this gets interesting. The state of Texas has 29 million people in it. Almost 30 million people in that population. The state of Georgia, 10.62. So about the third the population of Texas.
Right.
And they put in 2 less players. Couple more facts for you. Back-to-back number 1 overall picks. And I thought Chris Mooneyham, our friend, made a good point in response to this conversation. He said, 680 The Fan in Atlanta, he said, it's not just one position, right? Some states are known for producing quarterbacks, i.e. California.
Right.
Defensive back, South Florida, right? Last year, Trevor Lawrence was the first player taken quarterback. This year, same team. First player taken, defensive lineman out of Thomaston. Right? Quarterback out of Cartersville. Next year, defensive lineman out of Thomaston.
Yeah.
So back-to-back number 1 overall picks. I think you had 3 or 4 in the first round overall. Right?
I believe so, yeah.
But then you look at the per capita amount of players that are in the Power 5, amount of players in Division I football, the infrastructure in and around it, because you always look out at Texas. And to be fair, if you want to talk about fan support, I'd probably still give it to Texas because they're putting 40,000 people at a high school football game.
For sure.
Right? That's different. But when I'm talking about on the field, to me, it's hard to argue with 30 players drafted by NFL teams in one draft out of a population of 10 million.
Right. And I think, I think that's hard. Like, it's hard to break the mold. Like, what's the saying, right? You're gonna come for the king. You better not miss.
You best not miss.
Listen, it again, like you're talking about. It's not about fan support. It's not about the spectacle. Because if you're talking about the spectacle of high school football, it's hard to argue, and that's probably never going to change. It's always going to be Texas and those Friday Night Lights. But if you're talking numbers, pure football, and the recruiting numbers, like you said, the numbers that Georgia has been starting to take over and players drafted into the NFL. And just, again, you're talking about production and numbers. It's without a doubt starting to lean Georgia and has been for the past 4 or 5 years.
There's been a big 4 for a while, which has been
for sure.
Georgia, Florida, Texas, and California. And I throw Ohio in there as well because Ohio puts out some dudes. But when we're talking about producing talent, and you have to do it kind of at a per capita basis, right? Because California is even bigger than Texas. Right? So the fact that Georgia's putting out 2 less players in Texas and 8 more players than California into the NFL draft just is a credit, I think, to the coaching and to the parents and just to the quality of football in the state of Georgia.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to put the statement out there. Feel free to agree or disagree. We would absolutely love to hear the agreements or the disagreements. 912-342-7184. Get your thoughts on it. But you've been covering high school football in Georgia for a long time. I played high school football in the state of Georgia, there's an upward trajectory.
Yeah.
Currently happening. And a lot of these schools, there is a fiscal investment that's happening.
Sure.
And there's a facility investment that's happening, but also you have a ton of stuff outside of just the schools. Like I think of Chuck Smith in Atlanta, former Falcons great. He has his own pass rushing academy where people just come from all over the country to work with him there. But obviously the advantage you have is you're going to get a bunch of local players that get to work with one of the best pass rushers ever, developing their techniques, taking it to the next level, and then going off to the NFL. You have Terrence Edwards, who's got his tight end wide receiver academy, where he's working with a bunch of these local guys, getting them ready for the next level. It's a 7-on-7 camp. Say what you will about those, but another number 1 overall pick from the state of Georgia, Cam Newton, who's gotten involved. A dude who I will say had the best single season by a player in college football history. Is from the state of Georgia. So to me, right now, it's pretty inarguable that Georgia, at least, and obviously this is fluid, it changes every year, but right now, with the year that the state of Georgia has had, I'd say best football in the country, and I don't think it's really close.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would have to agree with you there, and like you said, I think that's another thing that people kind of get confused on. It's hard to break that mold of that thought process. It is a ever-flowing, ever-changing thing, and right now, I just feel like Georgia is, in fact, taking that throne. And like you said, it's been a progressive movement that has been coming, I think, for the past 4 or 5 years. You've seen that kind of boom a little bit, and it's because of so many different things. It's because of that investment. It's because by the schools themselves and the financial investments. It's because of those investments with the 7-on-7 and the involvement by former players and things like that. And I think players have a bigger commitment. Maybe not a bigger commitment, but it seems like more of a commitment to saying, you know what, I want to play football. And not only that, I can see so much of this is I can see now that there's a path. There really is one, and committing to that path.
Yeah.
I feel like that even more is becoming a part of this area.
It's from
too.
all over, right? It's not just one part of the state, right? You have Malik Willis, who's a 3rd-round pick there at quarterback out of Roswell, Georgia, right? We talked about the number 1 overall pick in Travon Walker. He comes out of Thomaston, Georgia, right? Zacoby McLean signed that deal. He's out of Valdosta. Myjai Sanders, a 3rd-round pick. He's out of Camden. It's all over the state. And I think that's what's really special. We're covering the state championship game in 4A between Carver Columbus, which is in Columbus, Georgia, which borders Alabama. And then you have BC out of Savannah, where you have now Zaquan Bryan has offers from a ton of Power 5 schools to play wide receiver. And then you looked at that line for Carver Columbus, and it was just nothing but Division I offers. Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, right? So it's a different level. And I think a lot of the credit goes to the coaches.
Sure.
And obviously a ton of the credit goes to the players themselves and the development that they get put through. And then just the way that I think communities go to a Pierce County game on a Friday night, right? Go to a Fitzgerald game on a Friday night. Go to Memorial Stadium in Savannah on a Friday night. It's the support of the communities around it. It's how important football is in and around the culture in the South. We talked about it. Everybody around the country loves football, right? It is America's biggest sport. It is 365 days a year down here.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's just a total credit to the I guess the community and the climate around football in the state of Georgia. What we saw was a celebration of that this past weekend. Let's take a quick break. Let's talk about the University of Georgia. And I said it, the state of Georgia had a big weekend.
In a lot of different ways, for sure.
So we'll talk about the University of Georgia, the records they broke over the weekend. Look at the Falcons draft, because PJ, something we did not see a lot of under the previous regime. A grades for the Falcons draft class from a lot of media members. Really like that Desmond Ridder 3rd-round pick. We'll talk about that. And then get you ready for some Braves baseball. Got a big series coming up, 4-game set with the NL East leading Mets coming up. We will not have shows on Tuesday or Wednesday. We got a doubleheader of baseball for you tomorrow. And then we have a getaway game on Wednesday, wrapping up that series against the Mets. So no show Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll be back on Thursday. But let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we're going to talk about the weekend that Georgia had, because if I'm Kirby Smart and I'm recruiting somebody after that, I'm just turning on the draft and walking out of the living room.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Number of draft picks from the University of Hawaii. Uno. Number of draft picks from the University of Kansas. 1.
Oh, they had one. That's
Yeah. Number of draft picks from Cedar Grove High School. 3.
There you go. Makes sense.
Number of draft picks from Marist High School.
All right, now, yeah.
2.
Makes a whole lot of sense.
Number of draft picks
Right.
from the University of Texas.
Oh, it's got to be
Hook 'em.
It's got to be double digits because they're back.
Hook 'em.
Did you hear that, by the way?
0.
Whoa. Imagine that.
How is that possible? Like, even in the worst of times,
Yeah.
Texas should have somebody. It should be a law.
Listen, all their great players were freshmen. Wait, what?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't
And
matter.
people are like, but the transfer portal. Like, well, okay, you should have, like, if you're Texas, you should have got some NIL money together and gotten a player in there that had some draft prospects last year and let them play it out.
There's ways.
0.
There's ways. Yeah, that's embarrassing,
0.
honestly.
All right. Also, over the weekend, before the weekend, I asked you over under 14 players drafted.
It's true. Yeah.
From Georgia, and I think you said right at it.
I can't remember exactly, but
I think you took it a hit.
That makes sense.
You took the push. You said 14.
Right.
Because it would be hard to get. We were down basically to Justin Schaefer, John Fitzpatrick, and Jake Camardo. We're like, all 3 of those guys probably aren't getting drafted.
I definitely remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said 4 in the first round because I went conservative with that. Knowing me, I probably pushed the 14.
So overhit.
Yeah.
Basically all 15 guys
big time
that were eligible to be drafted from the University of Georgia. And the reason I put the asterisk on that is Adam Anderson charged with rape prior to the NFL draft. I think it's safe to say, unless something crazy happens, his football career is done based off the allegations there. So the 15 players that I would say were actually eligible from the University of Georgia to be drafted, 15 for 15. New NFL draft record. Now, for the Notre Dame fans that want to point to the draft from 1834 and be like, back on the draft, Notre Dame had 37 players drafted one year.
What draft?
It's like, well, here's the thing. There was like 200 rounds.
Yeah. What are we
back
even
then.
talking about?
I don't care. We're talking about since 1994 when the NFL draft went to 7 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
2 teams prior to this year had the record. 2004 Ohio State saw 14 players get drafted, and then 2019 LSU in the 2020 draft saw 14 players get drafted. Arguably the best college football teams, like in the conversation, like top 5 college football teams ever.
I think I'm more surprised that just like the 2019 LSU certainly makes sense. Ohio State back in 04 was. I think I'm more surprised that Miami team, 2000 Miami,
it was kind of spread out.
That? Yeah.
It was kind of spread out. Like when you looked at their depth chart and you have like Sean Taylor and Ed Reed playing in the same secondary, it's like one of them's a junior, one of them's a freshman. So it was kind of spread out. Or like you have Willis McGahee and Frank Gore in the same backfield. Right. Like, so it's like it was a little bit spread out, but yeah, still freaky teams. So sure. I'll still say 2000. I'll still take 2001 Miami as the best ever. But that being said, we're talking about big weekend for Georgia. 15 players drafted. From the University of Georgia. Green Bay became the first team ever to take 2 players from the same school in the same first round. Took Quay Walker and Devonta Wyatt in the first round, and actually became the first team ever to pick players from the same school with 3 consecutive first round picks. Because in 2021 they drafted Eric Stokes from Georgia. So it's safe to assume that like the Packers front office just comes down, watches that defensive tape and goes, yeah, that'll work for us.
Yeah. Good thing too. I mean, they certainly need the help with that defense, but also, I mean, if you're not paying attention to Georgia's defense, especially over the last couple of years, like what are you doing?
Right.
So I think that they are honestly making insanely good decisions. And again, like that pair of those 2 helping out your defense, man, that's huge.
And that's exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles felt when they decided to take Jordan Davis, trade up for him to get him at 13, and then take Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round, which I found the Nakobe Dean stuff fascinating because I understood it. He was listen, as you get mad in your car,
that's kind of why I looked over. I was like, what?
Listen.
Huh?
Apparently there was some injuries that he had been dealing with. And when you are making an investment, it's hard to spend a 1st-round pick on something like that, especially for an undersized, albeit amazing linebacker, best player on that defense, in my opinion. Undersized. And if you watched his pro day, you could tell something was clearly wrong. It came out after the pro day. He had a strained pec that he suffered while getting ready for the draft, but there's been labrum tears and there's been other shoulder injuries, right? There have been rumors of lower body injuries, right? So Nakobe Dean, and that might just be the reality of playing inside linebacker for 3 years in the SEC.
True.
Right? When you're sticking your face in there with Evan Neal every play and you're having to tackle Brian Robinson.
Yeah, you're going to get banged up, man.
You're going full tilt. It's going to hurt.
That's why I'm kind of on the opposite end. But, I'm surprised.
Right. Well, let me finish my point. If it's any other inside linebacker, you're like, 3rd round's good. It's just because it's Nakobe Dean and everybody loves him. That they're like, 3rd round.
You're probably right.
Yeah. 3rd round. It's like, no, it's in the first few rounds, it's quarterbacks, wide receivers, DBs, and edge rushers, right? Like that's what people like to say. Oh, and offensive tackles. Some of the other positions you don't really see up there all that often. You have to be one of those freaky guys that also has the measurables, like a Roquan.
Yeah,
right? Roquan had the measurables. He was Nakobe Dean, but bigger.
True.
That's why he goes that high. It's like, think about the guys who get drafted. Luke Kuechly, but Luke Kuechly's like 6'3", and his arms are 19 feet long.
Yeah.
Or Patrick Willis is, right? The mutants. Nakobe Dean can fly, was Georgia's sack leader this past year, but I understood the hesitation with the injuries. And I think the Eagles now can say, if it works out, amazing. We got the dude who is arguably the best player and the leader of the best defense we've seen in a long time in college football, and we got him in a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you kind of putting the cherry on top of that point, that makes sense to me a lot more now. You're right. I let my eyes, I guess, get the better of me.
As soon as he didn't go with the 32nd overall pick, everyone was like, oh!
Yeah, exactly. Because you're like, you just look at the production of what he was able to do with that defense. But at the same time, like you said, with the size and everything like that and where inside linebackers normally go in the draft, I guess that does make sense. I still not. Now, I tweeted something else different, but, that's probably my heart more than anything else. I think Nakobe Dean really is probably the steal of this draft, even with him being drafted normally where an inside linebacker would be.
Yeah.
If you just purely look at the production and what he can do for your defense, man, I think that's probably the steal of the draft. And also, I know I was just talking about the pair that the Packers got.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick, if I could only pick 2 guys on the Georgia defense to pair up on my defense, man, Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, it's hard to beat that.
Bro, the inside of your defense just got so much better.
Nasty, dude.
Yeah. Got so much better. But again, just looking back at it, you set a record, and just think about the ammunition that this gives Kirby Smart.
For sure.
We've been talking about this, right? They've won the national championship. Multiple teams have won the national championship since Nick Saban got there, right?
Yeah.
We've seen LSU jump up there. We've seen Ohio State jump up there and win one. We've seen Clemson jump up there and win a couple, right? But we haven't seen anybody sustain.
Yeah.
Even talk about Ohio State, right? Ohio State's behind Clemson, in my opinion.
They're sustaining.
They sustain winning their conference.
Yeah, exactly.
For the most part.
Exactly.
They're always up there. Every now and then they'll jump up and get bit by a Michigan like this past year. But for the most part, they sustain, like Clemson does, winning their conference and then earning that bid to the college football playoff. But in terms of winning national championships, you have an LSU jump up there. A year later, their coach is fired.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have, and we said Ohio State won the first one in 2014. They've been to one championship game since.
Yeah.
Right? And it really wasn't close.
Right.
Against Alabama. So is Georgia in that position to step up and get there and compete with Alabama for that national championship spot every year? Obviously, they have a tougher road to hoe than a Clemson and an Ohio State, not because they play in the SEC. Well, I shouldn't say not because they have to play an SEC schedule, but because they have to get by Alabama to get to the college football playoff for the most part. We could see it again next year, like this year, where both of them get in, but you have that step one step earlier than any of these other teams that we're talking about. So
sometimes you play them in the season.
Yeah, sometimes and then you'll get like a rematch in the you'll get a rematch in the conference championship or something like that. But it's the ammunition that this is given Kirby Smart, not just in recruiting, right? But like in the recruiting idea of name, image, and likeness. You can tell them like what country has had, or what in the country, what school has had more exposure than us.
Sure.
Like, look, I told you it was going to be a Georgia infomercial.
Yeah.
And it
was
absolutely what it turned out to be. And so now, like I said, you can walk in, turn on the tape of the 2022 NFL draft and just walk out and say, call me.
Yeah. Quick question.
Yeah.
Because there's two insanely impressive, like one's a record and one's just to me, an insanely impressive thing that he can walk in and say this. The new record, is that more impressive, or 15 for 15? Like, I don't think that's something that should be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And I think that's
wild.
also a huge recruiting tool that he can say, sure, we got a bunch of players, but we didn't have 25 players that could have been drafted and only got 15. We were 15 for 15. Like, to me, that's insane.
Yeah. 15 for 15 is probably the more impressive of the two. And what's wild is none of them were 7th round picks.
Yeah.
It was 15 in the
Even
first 6 rounds.
Yeah. That's insane. That's crazy.
And shout out to the Atlanta Falcons for helping get that done, because they took Justin Schaefer and John Fitzpatrick. So
you think they like sent a little
Kirby was
Smart,
like, come on,
sliding in the DM there, like, hey, can you guys
Kirby
help
said,
us out?
listen, I'll try. Listen, you guys take these 2 players. I'll try to get more than 20,000 people in Mercedes-Benz for you,
there you go.
coming up this year. I mean, if anybody will show the Falcons how to pack out Mercedes-Benz.
He didn't say
it's Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, I was about to say, he didn't say what game, though.
Well, first game of the year, yeah.
He didn't say
Oregon, Georgia, and in Mercedes-Benz. Yeah, first game of the year. Let's take a quick break. I do want to talk about the Falcons, because they are getting a lot of love from a bunch of media members, and I think it was actually a good draft for the Falcons. So let's come back. Let's talk about some draft grades for the Falcons next, right here on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko. Glad to have you with us here on this Monday afternoon. PJ, it was a very odd weekend because I'm used to looking and just, I guess, wallowing in pity at how bad things are after the draft. And I wasn't overly excited about the Drake London pick. But now that I see this draft as a full picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was missing the forest for the trees, kind of the whole deal there. Now that I see it as a full picture, right?
Sure.
I like it. And apparently the rest of the people who get paid a lot of money to write about this stuff liked it as well. So let's do a quick recap of who the Falcons selected in the draft. Obviously, first round pick, number 8 overall, Drake London, big old USC wide receiver, 6'4", huge-bodied guy. A lot of people comparing him to a Vincent Jackson type of wide receiver, and I think some underrated breakaway speed for him, but a possession wide receiver. And the benefit of the doubt I'm giving them is Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot have obviously been around for a long time. Terry Fontenot had a lot to do with the Michael Thomas pick for the Saints, right? And the Titans have had some pretty dang good wide receivers, and Arthur Smith's time with them. So giving them the benefit of the doubt because they took the first wide receiver. So they felt like he was the best guy for their system. So, all right, I'll give him a check mark at the 8th overall pick. Love 30 picks later, the 38th overall pick, Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State. I've been practicing.
Yeah. That's someone that I wasn't even confident last week on how to say it.
Yeah.
So good job.
Out of Penn State, and is just about 6'4", 250, 260 pounds of get after it.
Yeah.
Out of just collapse the pocket. And I think a pretty dang good run defender as well, especially from some of the stuff that you sent me over this past weekend. So really like that pick. And then the second pick in round 2, Troy Anderson, a linebacker out of Montana State. Now, before you freak out about getting a linebacker of Montana State, dude played linebacker, running back, and quarterback for Montana State. He's about 6'4", playing inside linebacker, has arms for days, and is just, I think the Falcons are hoping he can kind of be a Luke Kuechly kind of guy. Big time pick up there at the linebacker position, and a guy that Mel Kiper loved. So I've had my disagreements with Mel Kiper, but you know what? I'll take it. If you're taking a flyer on attributes with the second pick in the second round, I get it.
Yeah, and that's fine from that standpoint. And with the Luke Kuechly comparison, right?
Yeah.
Let's not make pretend like, Luke Kuechly came out of, Alabama. It's Boston College. Just kind of the same thing as Montana State.
Yeah, it's just
similar.
Multiple All-American, like ACC tackle leader. Yeah, Luke Kuechly is totally the same as Montana State. Here's where I think the diamonds in the rough start shaking out too, which is fine when you get to this point. 74th pick, 3rd round, Desmond Ridder. So you get your quarterback, and he was the first quarterback taken after Kenny Pickett was taken with a 20th pick in the first round. And so I think the reality of this draft was none of the quarterbacks were great.
Yep.
Right. And we knew that, but it felt like all the storylines that kept getting pushed, like, oh no, Malik Willis could be a top 10 pick and yada, yada, yada. It was, no, the NFL realized what the cap was for a lot of these guys, and it's very low floor and maybe some potential, but let's wait it out and see what happens. And so once Desmond Ridder gets taken, then you see a bunch of quarterbacks get taken off the board, but it's all on the 3rd round and later. So I like the Desmond Ridder pick because if he works out, you got to steal in the 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
The higher probability is he's just an okay NFL quarterback. And you know what? That's fine with a 3rd round pick. He can be a backup, or if it just doesn't shake out in Atlanta, it's a 3rd round pick. You didn't spend a top 10 pick on something you weren't sure about. So I really like that pick for, like I said right here, his ceiling in the NFL, this is per PFF, is probably good starter.
Yeah.
Right? Where he could be a great quarterback. If everything works out, like you mentioned, like a Russell Wilson, where everything, the stars kind of align, and he's a guy who went to the college football playoff, took Cincinnati to the college football playoff, right? I like that pick. Now, here's where the Flyers really started. Second pick in the 3rd round, you get edge Deangelo Malone out of Western Kentucky, another one of these Georgia high school football players getting drafted, and he is very much a high ceiling guy, where he's a pass rusher out of Western Kentucky, get after it, long, lanky. If he works out, great. You got another pass rusher. If not, again, 82nd pick. Round 5, Tyler Algier out of BYU. Big old physical between the tackles running back with some breakaway speed from BYU. He's probably going to be your lead back if I had to guess. And if you can get your lead back in the 5th round,
yeah,
you're doing some good drafting.
Value. Yeah.
And then here's where you get excited, PJ.
Hey-o.
For the first time since 2011, the Atlanta Falcons selected Georgia Bulldog in the NFL draft.
You love it.
They go get Justin Schaefer, the guard from Georgia, and he's a guy who plays with a nasty edge to him. Go back and watch the national championship when Georgia started going on those death marches with Zamir White.
Mm-hmm.
They started pushing the pile. Justin Schaefer's a dude who's like doing like belly flops on top of the pile. Yeah. He's getting in the scuffles with guys after the plays, but also just a nasty run blocker. And I think that kind of attitude, he's one of the guys from Cedar Grove, and so a hometown guy. That kind of attitude is really, I think, could be a good infusion on the Falcons offensive line. And then the final pick of the draft for the Atlanta Falcons, another Georgia guy, John Fitzpatrick, tight end. He is the antithesis of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, big, tall, lanky, go get it, receiving tight end. John Fitzpatrick had less than 10 receptions.
I'm really happy about not only the pick, but now I know what antithesis means.
Yes. So you go get a big blocking tight end who has some receiving abilities.
Yeah.
But you go get a big, smart blocking tight end and another Georgia dude.
Yep.
From Marist High School in Atlanta. So you go get another Georgia guy, John Fitzpatrick, going to be playing tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. I think he'll be a guy who makes this roster.
Right.
I think as a blocking tight end. And something funny, too, that you can go back and look. Georgia now in the past 3 drafts, 2020, 2021, and 2022, has had a tight end drafted that had less than 10 receptions his final year.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, I think that's good teams and a lot of the drafts, a lot of the draft picks are teams that see a situation, see these one situational type players that they need, and they go and get them. And I love the fact that with those couple picks, especially, I know you love this too.
Yeah.
Got a little bit more nasty, a little bit more powerful.
Dude, I hope Justin Schaefer goes out there and they're competing in camp and Jalen Mayfield gets a look at what you're supposed to look like when you're playing offensive guard.
There you go. Yeah.
So
rub off on him a little bit.
Yeah. That being said, we got to take a quick break. We'll come back, get you ready for 3 and Out next right here on ESPN Radio. I don't know that John Fogerty inherently knew a whole lot about baseball. I could be center field.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could be your center fielder. I don't know. I don't want to take shots at John Fogerty.
Something like that.
I don't want to take shots. We got Braves baseball coming up for you a little bit later. We got a lot of Braves baseball coming up for you over the next couple of days. Starting a 4-game series with the New York Metropolitans.
Hey,
yeah, you like that?
Yeah, throwing it in there every now and then. That's good.
You didn't know what Met stood for.
No, I did. Come on now.
Max Fried on the mound tonight. First pitch set for 7:10. PJ knew what Met stood for. And then tomorrow, you got a double header. Going to see Charlie Morton get going there for the first part of that doubleheader. All that coming up on ESPN Radio. 3 and Out coming up next.